we should be done by 3 o'clock, where we've got some wonderful afternoon tea out there. That discussion we had previously was just awesome. We've all been communicators. We all know the challenges, so if we put our might together and help the team, I think it'd be really awesome and we'll get there. So I'd like to introduce Courtney Hunter, who's the digital content and social media strategist, and she'll be indigenous.gov.au.
Yes.
I can read. So Courtney's here to talk to us about how to connect with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, which is vitally important to all of us. Thanks, Courtney.
So I'd like to echo Sarah's original welcome with Daura Nuna, Tarawa Nunawo, Yangu Nalamanyin, Dunimanyin, Nunawal Wari, Tarawa Wari, Dindi, Wangerlin Jinyin. This is Ngunnawal country. Today we are all meeting together on Ngunnawal country, and we acknowledge and pay our respects to the elders. So firstly, I'd like to thank today's hosts for this event and also their ongoing support of indigenous.gov.au. And as said, my name is Courtney Hunter, and today we're going to explore how public service communicators can better harness the opportunities of indigenous.gov.au to connect with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences. So today we're going to look at what indigenous.gov.au does and our channels, go into some case studies about how we have supported communications in 4 very different ways. And finally, I'll answer some of the common questions that we get, but I also welcome you to ask your questions at the end of this presentation. And by the end of today, I hope to show you the value of indigenous.gov.au can bring to your communications and give you another avenue to explore when communicating with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So who are our audiences? Connecting with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences requires a nuanced approach and can sometimes be a challenge for communicators, let alone public servants. These audiences comprise of a wide range of people with different communication needs, information preferences, and expectations of government. These audiences are also influenced by a number of factors such as location, literacy, age, cultural considerations, and access to communication and media channels. Many among us have been effectively engaging and communicating with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences for many years. However, many of these communications haven't used or haven't known about indigenous.gov.au and the opportunities these channels present to further communicate their message. I mean, think about your own role and situation. Before this month's ComCAN newsletter or this presentation, did you know about indigenous.gov.au? Have you thought about using whole of government channels but didn't pursue it as you didn't know where to start or where to begin? Or were you dissuaded from using them because you had issues with capacity or they weren't considered a key audience? Well, I'm here to tell you that we are here to support you and using indigenous.gov.au to help your messages reach these audiences. So while indigenous.gov.au has changed over the years, today our purpose is to connect Indigenous Australians with relevant and culturally appropriate information on government policies, programs and grants. And our approach is by celebrating the achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their cultures. And unlike many whole of government initiatives, we rely on storytelling to convey our message, and we approach it from a people and community first lens. So research shows that indigenous.gov.au does have a strong awareness among Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. However, our success relies on 3 factors. Just as with all communications, we rely on trust and buy-in from the audiences to effectively reach them. And this is especially important when working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as they have an understandable mistrust of government. Secondly, we use consultative communications practices where we work with audiences and stakeholders to develop content and widely consult for approval. And thirdly, we ensure that all products are published on our channels are of a high quality, are culturally sensitive, and published consistently. And while 2 decades, and I'm serious, this has been around since the year 2000, has been spent on cultivating this ongoing trust, we work hard to ensure we nurture these strong and respectful rapports with our audiences, and we cater to their changing needs and interests. So before I show you some case studies, which will hopefully get you thinking on how you can incorporate indigenous.gov.au into your channels and your work, I'll give you a whirlwind tour. So first stop is our website. So the indigenous.gov.au website is the centre from which all of our work stems. As a whole of government website, we rely heavily on input from other agencies and stakeholders for the continuity of content and for our success. I like to think of our website much like a meeting place. Everyone has their own reason for being there. Some people come in to catch up and have a read of some of our yarns. Some people want the latest information, and there are some people who just come to see what's going on. At this point, I'd like to say that indigenous.gov.au is also not exclusionary when it comes to our content. While it relates to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and they are our key audiences, our website contains information and has lots of different visitation from people of non-Indigenous backgrounds. So our website has been visited by more than 700,000 people over the last year and has had 1.1 million unique page views in 2021. The majority of our visitors are male, with half of our demographic under the age of 34. And our content is organised according to the key themes of the Indigenous Advancement Strategy. And as you can tell, these themes are pretty broad, and we find our stakeholders manage to find at least one category in which they fit. We also build new topic pages from time to time. So for example, in recent years, we've built pages about COVID-19 and the Indigenous voice to align with major topics of interest for our audiences. And so with our website, we have a couple of different ways we present the information. So stories, events, and announcements, or C for short. Stories form the backbone of indigenous.gov.au, and they bring the colour and life to our website. We publish between 2 to 3 stories a week, and you can see the topics vary. This is a recent snapshot, and we've published stories about the positive impacts of rodeo on the education of kids in Normanton, Queensland, how an Indigenous business owner, Narelle Jones, has struck out on her own to build her own graphic design organisation, a tribute to the NAIDOC 2021 award winners, and some content sharing cultural knowledge from the Gidja peoples of the East Kimberley. A lot of our stories and content comes from the National Indigenous Australians Agency and their regional network. However, we get story leads all the way through to fully formed content from across the APS and stakeholders. And while many of these stories are linked to government programs and or priorities of the the Indigenous Advancement Strategy, this is not a prerequisite. What all these stories do have in common is that we celebrate achievements big and small. For example, this year, we've written about the athletes at top of their field heading to the Olympics, as well as the local kids soccer team getting new uniforms and winning the grand final. These stories, as mentioned, are told through a people and community first approach, and a government policy, grant, or program will never lead our stories. We centre the story on the person. Who are they? What do they do? What do they like to do? What are their passions, their family, their life experiences? We highlight their achievements and their plans for the future. Any support they have received to achieve their goals are important, but never form the centre of our story. And we also don't shy away from difficult topics. In recent months, our content has touched on topics such as sorry business, incarceration, and children in out-of-home care. Despite all of this, we ensure the story is told sensitively and maintains a positive and hopeful tone. So these two stories here, authenticity is key in our storytelling, and we prefer to show, not tell. So let's take a look at the story on the left here, which is from the Army Aboriginal Community Assistance Program, or ACAP, which is a program jointly run between the NIAA and the Australian Army. We incorporated the drawings of children from Pomporour State School into our article announcing the arrival of the 6th Brigade members of the 19 Chief Engineer Works and the 6th Engineer Support Regiment, I hope I got that right, into the North Queensland community. And as for us, no quote from these kids was ever going to come close to the genuine excitement of young Kathy and her beautiful card. Yes, there were quite a few of them we had to pick. Similarly, our video where we sat down with Maggie Jean Douglas, this year's NAIDOC poster competition winner, we allowed her to talk through her creative process and what NAIDOC means to her, rather than us just simply reporting that she won the competition. Building that connection and showcasing the artist behind the iconic poster, which was displayed around Australia and the world, really helped connect the poster to our audience, as opposed to just the thing that's handed out every year or downloaded every year. Something of which we are particularly proud is that our stories have been picked up by news outlets such as the ABC on occasion, and that's happened about once every year since I've been there. And while I stress this is not the norm for our stories, it is a testament to the quality content of our content coordinator, Daryl Hooper, who publishes these stories every week without fail. So we have hundreds of stories from across Australia just like these above, and it is in our experience there is always a story to tell. So next up is our events calendar, which is available for anyone to submit an event directly through our website. We have some pretty broad guidelines on our website about what makes it through to final publication, but we have two guiding principles. Firstly, an event must be something someone can attend, either in person or virtual. And secondly, it must be relevant or targeted to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. If you're not sure your event would make the cut, we're more than happy to chat to you about how your event might fit in the calendar. And over the years, this calendar has promoted everything from virtual consultation sessions and conferences to markets and exhibitions. And finally, we have announcements. We publish several announcements every day on a myriad of topics. This section is the factual content and includes media releases from departments, ministers and stakeholders, as well as informational pieces on new or existing programs and services. Many of our announcements are Indigenous specific, however we do accept content which is culturally appropriate but not Indigenous specific. So a great example is this one here, which was published earlier this year and republished I think about a week ago, which is about the Vet Fee Help Redress Scheme run by the Commonwealth Ombudsman. So this is not specific to Indigenous Australians, but it is important that they're made aware of this scheme as they may have been affected. So it's all very well and good, we have a website full of content, but how does this reach our audiences? So, the first avenue is through the indigenous.gov.au newsletter. The newsletter has just shy of 2,000 subscribers, and we generate an e-newsletter every week, which is sent out bright and early on a Wednesday morning, except for the one Wednesday I happen to be presenting, with a curated snapshot of our stories, announcements, and events published during the previous week. We also upload previous editions of our newsletter to our website, and I encourage you to go have a look at them, so people can access the old editions, they can learn more about the contents of our newsletter before signing up, and it facilitates easier sharing for us of our newsletters across social media. Our newsletter, as it says on the screen, has about an open rate of 27% and a click rate of 20%. And our subscribers, many of them belong or live in Indigenous communities, work for stakeholder organisations or government, or are people who are just generally interested in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander issues or news. We also publish the majority of the content on our website on social media, pushing back to the website. And Indigenous.gov.au has quite a large social media footprint. Our social media channels include what's on the screen behind me, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. And we leverage the LinkedIn account of the National Indigenous Australians Agency to share our content where it is relevant for any policy area for which they are responsible. Facebook is our main channel of communication with just over 49,000 followers. We have an organic reach of about 1.1 million roughly each year, and we have about 30,000 engagements for the same period. 72% of our Facebook audience are women and aged between 25 and 54, and 40% of our audience are located in Australian capital cities. The Facebook channel has a really community feel, which I love about it, as we get a lot of support from mums and aunties and elders, tagging people in their content, as well as celebrating the achievements of the people featured in our stories. And overall, it's a really positive and supportive environment that I love to manage. Twitter is used to keep our stakeholders in the know and has an average of about 5,000 profile views a month. This is where we publish lots of information and stakeholder content, as well as the media releases from the Minister for Indigenous Australians. Our engagement on this channel can vary widely depending on what is currently happening in the news media, as well as the time of year. So for example, we tend to get greater engagement during NAIDOC week or Reconciliation week. Our Instagram has been growing over the past couple of years, and we just clocked over 12,000 followers last weekend. We're extremely proud of what we've managed to achieve on Instagram this year, and our account has grown by 25% in the last year alone, and the reach of our posts have increased by almost 70%. Similar to Facebook, our demographic is 73% women, however the majority are under the age of 35. We use this channel primarily for visually engaging storytelling, evergreen content, ongoing program updates, and milestone announcements. Our engagement on this platform is strong, and we looked forward to 2022 and all the new ways that Instagram's bringing out to help promote our stories and news. And finally, we have YouTube. Now, our YouTube following is very, very small, and we have not published as many videos as we would have liked to in the past couple of years. However, we've embraced sharing playlists from other agencies, and there is always new content on our channel. By giving videos from other agencies exposure without owning the video, we are disadvantaged as we don't get the video stats. However, we feel like the advantages outweigh this. For example, it reduces on admin. So if you upload a video and we've shared the playlist to our playlist, it automatically updates. So we don't have to have an email back and forth, which I'm sure everyone's glad about. It helps reduce the duplication of videos across YouTube and ensures the information remains with the responsible agency for them to update as necessary. Now, I know I have just bombarded you with a ton of information about content types and stats and all of that, so let's see some of this in action. But before I start, I'd like to caveat that these case studies are the experience of indigenous.gov.au and does not relate, so a lot of our stakeholders, I don't have the stakeholder information for. I just have the information for indigenous.gov.au. So firstly, as mentioned earlier, storytelling is the backbone of indigenous.gov.au. So we're working with the Department of Education, Skills and Employment late last year to promote the Commonwealth Scholarships Program for young Australians. We published the announcement on the left here, letting people know it was open and accepting applications. This is our BAU. However, rather than leaving it there, we decided to go one step further. Working with DESI and stakeholders, we interviewed a young woman from Shepparton, so here, Narali on the right, about her experience of the program and what she hoped to achieve through the scholarship. By telling this story and infusing this scholarship program with a personal perspective, we got 9 times more page views than the original announcement alone. And across the board, it engaged better on social media for each of our channels. This is just one of the many examples of storytelling that we use across our channels. And we found that this is actually a more effective tool to engage Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples rather than just information alone. Another one is ORIC. So ORIC is the Office of the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations, and they have been profiling Indigenous corporations for many years. And for more than a year now, we've been working with them to grow the reach of this wonderful story that they publish every month across our website, newsletter, and social media. So rather than republishing their story, we amplify their content by publishing part of their story. We publish a teaser almost. And so that one's on the left, and that's then included in our newsletter. We don't republish the story in its entirety, as we want to keep the series together on ORIC's website, and we also want people who are interested in Indigenous governance to head to where the most relevant information is held. We then use a hybrid approach when it comes to the social media. So ORIC, for example, does not have Facebook or Instagram, so here on the right, we publish native content in conjunction with them to maximise the reach of their content. However, in the centre here, we've got a Twitter post. So ORIC have a Twitter and LinkedIn account. We amplify their content. We just share it with a bit of a quote share, just so their content and their account get the amplification required. And as I said, I can only speak about the effect it's had on indigenous.gov.au, but this has been really great. This has been a great and very successful partnership and has brought a personal and lively element to our Indigenous business and governance content. Our events calendar was strategically used by the Indigenous Voice consultation, which ran for 4 months in early 2021. The consultation was a massive undertaking by the NIAA and resulted in more than 9,000 Australians participating in the discussions. Despite all of these events published on their own website, indigenous.gov.au published each consultation, in person or virtual, on the indigenous.gov.au website. So that's kind of on the left what an event looks like. Ordinarily, we would include these events in a standard newsletter. However, the volume of the events necessitated that we develop their own special newsletter, and that was sent as a weekly wrap-up of all the upcoming events for the next week or fortnight. We also supported the promotion of these consultations on social media. We published Facebook and Twitter posts for each consultation. We used a weekly roundup idea similar to the newsletter on LinkedIn. And our Instagram stories we used to update. So we had an Instagram story so people could go in and use it, which was highlighted on the account, and people could click through it to work out what was coming up. We'd update that every day to remove any old consultations. So that meant that the time, location, and the event registration were all in one handy location for our young audience. Of the 2,600 page views these events received purely on our website alone, 20% of these users went onto the registration page for the consultation. So while this doesn't seem like a lot, given that we were just one avenue for promoting the consultations, and this is just the website stats alone, it just shows there's also other issues with the fact that many of these consultations were in regional areas where access to communications isn't as strong. This is a great result for us, having a click-through rate of 20%. We also supported the Indigenous Voice consultations through support for social media advertising, Indigenous Voice setting up a topic page on our website, as mentioned before, to group all of the Indigenous Voice content together, as well as working with their comms team to find ways to present all of their content in the best way possible. So the Indigenous Voice is probably the largest and most complex consultation we have been involved in. However, we support consultations all the time, and they're varying sizes and complexities. We are always happy to work with you to find a way to promote your consultation on our platforms. And finally, our favourite topic, COVID-19. So COVID-19 communications is a great case study in how stories and announcements have been used to support the response to COVID-19 from the very beginning. We've worked with stakeholders for the past 2 years to keep Indigenous audiences abreast of changes in information and regulations and advice since March 2020. This collaboration is where indigenous.gov.au truly shows its strength as a whole of government platform. We publish timely and culturally appropriate information about COVID-19 to our audiences when it comes to hand. We also use all of the channels at our disposal to ensure that content reaches the maximum audience. And through using social media, the social media posts related to COVID-19 are among our top ranking posts across all our channels for 2020. So I spoke about audience trust earlier and how that is integral to indigenous.gov.au. And it has become clear in the past 2 years that we rely on this trust every day to ensure that these communications are successful and we maintain that position of trust in the community. We have published everything from the original announcements of communities closing in early 2020 right through to last week's booster announcements. We've spent the past 2 years fine-tuning our approach and making sure that information is developed with our audiences and sensitively conveyed. The Department of Health and NIAA have been great partners in this, however, they have not been the only ones. While we've continued the flow of information, we've also found opportunities to be true to our purpose and tell us the story. Here are just a couple of them. So for example, there's a story here on the left about how Doomadgee State High School pivoted to online learning, how Meekatharra remote school attendance strategy helped their remote Western Australian community stay connected and stay involved during the original lockdowns, and how Indigenous businesses on the right-hand side pivoted during COVID-19. So this one was done specifically with the Department of Industry. As I said, we are constantly fine-tuning this approach to our COVID-19 communications, and I don't pretend to think we've got it right. For us, it's an everyday battle. For us, it's a matter of balancing the information and getting that essential advice into communities while maintaining years of hard-earned respect, as well as trying to tell the stories of these communities and their achievements during COVID-19, despite the obstacles that have been placed in our way. So now you have a better idea of just the different ways that we display information and we tell the story, and how we've been supported by the APS to convey these messages through indigenous.gov.au. And I bet you're all full of questions, so I hope that this can answer some of the most common questions that our team receives about indigenous.gov.au. So firstly, Indigenous.gov.au exists to promote the work of Indigenous Australians across the Commonwealth. This is false. This is not true at all. Every agency has a responsibility to communicate with and engage with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences. And while a lot of our content does come from Indigenous related agencies, this is a result of their awareness of us in their space. I'm here to tell you that APS agencies, no matter which one you are, have an equal right to have your content on indigenous.gov.au. And it also is key to our success. Without displaying all of the Australian government on indigenous.gov.au, we just end up basically being not a whole of government channel, but being a whole of government who happens to know about us channel. Secondly, indigenous.gov.au is set up for advertising. I cannot stress this enough, though. We need to be involved from the outset. So if you are interested in using us as a platform, please come and talk to us. We need to be active partners in any campaign on indigenous.gov.au, as we have a responsibility to balance the channel access of the advertising as well as other content on our channels and the access of stakeholders. And finally, we get asked all the time whether you need to have prepared content, materials and cleared before you talk to us. And that is very, very wrong. Unfortunately, you do not need to have prepared materials to come up to talk to us. And we do ask, however, that you have communication objectives, some key messages, and if you've got a story lead, we're always open. So if you would like to use our channels, though, we're more than happy to chat to you from an early on in your content planning stage. Together, we can advise you on how indigenous.gov.au can best support your communication goals. And the reason we ask for you to chat with us is because we maintain editorial control over our channels. Providing us content cleared by all and sundry without notice can often cause more issues in the long run because we require reclearances. Also, we can help you with preparing content, as we have some handy templates that we can provide you so you can find it easy to write the content and we find it easy to publish. So you guys, thank you very much, have patiently listened to me for so long, drone on, but I know you're now all really eager to get involved. So here are just some really simple ways that you can get involved with indigenous.gov.au to ensure we continue to thrive for years to come. Firstly, you or your agency can follow us on social media channels, or you can subscribe to our newsletter. Hint, hint, I'd love to get over the 2,000 this year. We also produce a lot of content which can help your channels more broadly, particularly around days of significance, and our stories may be broadly relevant to your area of work. You can tag us in content, or you can email us the links of the content which you'd like us to share. You can contact us via email or social media, direct message, and we're more than happy to set up a meeting with you to chat through how we can help amplify your content. Now, we don't have a direct phone number. Occasionally that gets asked of us, but if you send us an email, we're more than happy to get back to you on your preferred number at your preferred time. You can also add us to your email stakeholder distribution lists, which would be really helpful, so we can get the information that you're seeking to promote, and we'll do our best to make sure it gets in. My other favourite one, and I cannot stress this enough, tell your colleagues about indigenous.gov.au. Indigenous.gov.au may not be right for you, but it may be right for one of your colleagues or one of your friends who also works in the APS. For us, this is really important because this is how we've gotten most of our leads in the last couple of years. And keep us in mind, you never know where you're going to be working in 6, 12, 18 months' time, and we might not be relevant now, but we may be relevant in the future. So before I open the floor to any questions, I'd like to share what I hope are the key takeaways from this presentation. First and foremost, indigenous.gov.au is here to help. We don't expect anyone wanting to publish content on our platforms for the first time to approach us with an understanding of the ins and outs of our platforms. We can advise you on how we can use these channels together and connect your content with our audiences. However, you know your content best, and we can't create your content for you. Secondly, indigenous.gov.au relies on and has a great success using storytelling as a tool to convey our message. We champion this style of communication, and if you are interested in trying this out for yourself, we welcome you to work with us to share your stories. Thirdly, Indigenous.gov.au is not a full solution when it comes to communicating with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences. We recognise our limitations as a selection of digital platforms, but we are just one tactic available in the APS communicators arsenal to connect with stakeholders and to connect with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And we encourage you to think holistically when speaking with these audiences. And finally, as I mentioned before, our ongoing success as an effective whole-of-government communication platform relies on input from all areas of government and stakeholders. Even if this platform isn't for you now, it could be in the future. So please tell a mate. Thank you so much for your attention, and I understand it's late in the afternoon, but I leave you with this information about how you can reach us. And if any of you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them now.
Thanks, Courtney. That was awesome. And I'm starting to think about how we can do that with our science, because we want to incorporate that a lot.
There's always a way, and we do a lot of STEM content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Courtney. That was really good. I was just curious how many questions you guys get about translation into other languages, and do you work with First Nations like radio and Peak-Body First Nations Media Australia and that sort of type of stuff? Or?
So as a whole of government platform, we receive the content. So if there was any translation or whatnot, that would be the responsibility of the communicator or the communications plan to outline. I do understand that the NIAA have an interpretation service, but that's more like a person-to-person thing, and translations are, I believe, the responsibility of the Office for the Arts, but don't quote me on that one. But yes, we do welcome translated materials all the time. We've got heaps of stuff on our website.
I may have missed it, but at the start you did give a bit of a breakdown of your audience, but only in sort of general terms, male and under 30 or something, or something.
Age, yeah, we only have access through Google Analytics and whatever the social media platforms are. But yeah, as I said, it changes. So for Facebook, for example, it is and same with Instagram, it's the mums, it's the aunties, it's the cousins, letting people know that a certain information's been shared. On Twitter, it is more of that stakeholder engagement. We get a lot more of academia in there. LinkedIn, I didn't really cover because that's for the National Indigenous Australians Agency. YouTube's a bit of a mixed bag. Everybody comes along. But when it comes to the website and the newsletter particularly, it can really vary with what we're publishing. So because on social media we can share and we've got a broader content base, but when it comes to the website, you know, for example, we have a lot more business people who are joining our newsletter at the moment, but that's because we've published for about the last 3 months Indigenous business content. So it can really vary widely. Unfortunately, all I have from Google Analytics is male, 63%, and most access from a desktop. If that helps.
So you don't know where they are?
Oh, where we do, most of them are coming from metropolitan areas. The majority do come from metropolitan or city areas, so regional.
Is that due to lack of internet out in regional areas, or is it just a different way they communicate and not rely on the digital infrastructure like what you do in the cities?
I'd say it's both.
I was just wondering what special protocols you might have around photos, using photos.
So it varies. So for a lot of our stories, we've pivoted to a model where we request an image from an organisation. So for example, I'm trying to think of one of the stories we published, but we request an image from them. They give us permission to show their image for as long as is appropriate. They do still reserve the right to contact us and say, you know, we no longer wish to have this image portrayed. There may be someone who's passed away in it, and then we cross that bridge when we get to it. And we've had to do it a couple of times. We do also have consent forms and things like that. So when our when we publish a story and we'd like to hold the image, we do get people to release consent. So that will be around the very exciting upcoming Minister's Christmas card competition, that we've got consent from all of the artists in the competition to display their works. So it's a bit of a medium of, we get permission from the organisation to show the image. Some images we get consent from, and then on social media when we share, it's the responsibility of the organisation that it's their responsibility. So we shared from the ABC, it's on the ABC if we've shared it, kind of thing. So a bit of a model.
All right, we've got time for one more question, and then we're on to Kirsten.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just wondering if you've done any market research around how Indigenous Australians are accessing information and what sort of information that they want that we might be able to look at.
Unfortunately, it's not within the scope of indigenous.gov.au at this time to do that kind of market research. I do understand that there has been research undertaken about indigenous.gov.au, and so when I said that there is an awareness of indigenous.gov.au in the community, that information was from about 2018, I think, I want to say. So we have had that research commissioned, but that was also when the Indigenous Affairs Group, so NIAA, was within PM&C. So at the moment, we don't have that information, and I don't think that that's kind of on the cards for the at least short-term future.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Any more last minute? Oh, there's always one, isn't there?
No, he knows what he's
Sorry,
talking about. It's okay.
Make the point for everyone. When you think Indigenous, don't just think remote. The largest Indigenous population we have is in Western Sydney. The second largest is in Brisbane. So they receive the same content, same as all of us, through Facebook, through TV, through all the same channels that everybody else uses. Whilst we always do have really good consideration for our remote audiences, we don't want to overlook the fact that the vast majority of Indigenous Australians live in metro centres.
Which is exactly why indigenous.gov.au is not a full solution. So, yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, thank you. I've taken note of those channels and